Welcome to Coffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person.
Dan, 60 views. You got to be out of your mind. You got to be kidding me. What the heck's going on? All right. I don't understand it. So, Dan, do thumbnails make a difference? I think they do. Maybe they do. I'm not sure if they do. It seems like people see they do. Obviously, people are doing it for a reason, but you want to be evergreen. You want to be ever clean. You want to be ever something. You want to be ever present. Okay. I don't understand it. We do a video on some of the rarest cards ever, the Professor card set. Okay. The plaque set. And you write down that you're going to discuss the plaques. And that's fine. That's what we discussed, right? We're going to be straight up with our audience. But there's like 15 in existence of the first one, and there's brand new ones coming out now, and nobody knows who they are. And you told me, they're like, you said to our audience, you said, Dad, you said, these are at the back of the binders. They're the full art cards. They're one of the very few full art cards to get a Professor stamp, if maybe the only one. That's how unique and special, and nobody watches the video. Dan, what's up? What's going on? What do we need to do different? Should we say, have you seen these cards? Are these cards missing? Do you know what these cards are? Do you guys want to know about the rarest cards? What are we not doing right, Dan?
Well, that video, I was sick yesterday, so were you. That's why we were a day off for recording. It didn't go up until late at night. That hurt it a little bit. So I'm hoping it catches up a little bit more over the next day or so before this one goes up. But I think it is just because of how late at night it actually went up. It still hasn't even been up for 24 hours at time of recording, so.
Okay, Dan, I'm going to buy your explanation because I have no other thing I can do. You forced me to record. You forced me to get up. You forced me to wake up from my naps to take recordations with you, and that's fine. So we're going to see if you can prove me wrong again. I hope it's just a release time situation. But folks, if you haven't taken a look at that video, I encourage you to, because it's like 15 in existence of those sets, and they are special. They really are unique, and nobody knows about them. So pass the word and share the love with somebody out there. Okay, Dan, what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about, this is talk about something else. There was a suggestion made to me. Somebody made a suggestion that they love this podcast so much. They think this podcast is so special. They think that you can do so much damage on this podcast, Dan, with your OG knowledge of the hobby, that we should discuss an actual set every single podcast. Because, of course, in my collection, I have every single set: mini set, regular set, top dog set, small dog set that you'd have after dinner, and wine. So we could then, that would be the topic. We just kind of go in chronological order or whatever, or we don't have to. We can go in era order, and we talk about like that. And we kind of did that in the old podcast days of Coffee Talks. So Dan, should that be where we get back to our roots, our evergreen roots, where we plant the soil and we fertilize it and we allow the knowledge to grow amongst our audience, Dan? Should we be doing that?
We can definitely do that, but if we do, we're not starting today because there's no way I'm covering base set with no prep time.
Yes, I wasn't intending for you to cover today, Dan. These are the longer term plans for the speciality that is the Coffee Talks channel. So I won't put that.
Since we're doing them every day, I don't think we would cover a set an episode. I think we'd spread them out, 1 or 2 a week. Because I don't think we want to just ram through, 100 days in a row or something of doing a set a day. I think we'll spread them out a bit because there'll be other news and stuff to talk about. But yeah, I'm happy to do that.
So Dan, you don't want to ram through, but Dan, I just can't. If you're so lucky, when they make a technology that allows somebody to deliver a blow to someone's face through a computer screen, I think I'm going to be the first to buy into that technology because I just adore you so much. Dan, today I wanted to just briefly cover the concept of error cards, because when you look at you and I, Dan, as people, we're errors. We're errors in the large schematic of life and the holistic solar system itself, right? The Peruvio universe, okay? We are errors. We're not. And you know what, Dan? In this day and age, we have some things going on politically in our country. Oh, wait a minute. Is Dan in the country now? Luca, is Dan? Yeah, what did you say? Green card? Okay. But he's a citizen, right? Okay. So, Dan, in our world, in this country, there are people that don't like anything that's not straight and narrow, up your basic. And then if you come off that path now, there's an administration that may not be too happy with you. But in the Pokemon world, there's Facebook misprints and errors and all kinds of groups where errors are all the rage, right? Coachella for errors. So you spend days and weeks and you kind of get mired in and you're just in the morass of errors. And I don't collect those, Dan. I don't really collect those. I collect some errors, I guess I, kind of cordon off, categorize my errors in certain ways where they're repetitive in some way, they're well known to the hobby, they're exceedingly rare in the sense that there's some actual text missing from a card or something. But these folks, they love crimps and hickey marks and air and ink spots that aren't there. Talk to me about that, Dan. What is that? What kind of need does that facilitate in people to love their errors so much more than collecting sets, characters, whatever? It's all about the error card.
Well, it's just a different aspect of collecting. They're collecting something that really shouldn't exist, shouldn't have made it out into the general public. It's stuff that a lot of it you would expect it to be caught by quality control. If quality control checked every card, which they don't, I need people to understand that quality control does not check every single card. But it's that kind of thing where it's just something has gone wrong and something looks a bit different than it should. And a lot of people focus their collections basically entirely on that a lot of the time, where they only go for these error cards.
When you talk about quality control and you emphasize they don't check all of the things coming out, what do they check in your mind? What do you think actually does get checked? Or once it gets pre-production checked and it gets, put on a machine where they're all stuck in, like, I have no idea. Do you have any idea about Pokemon card production? What part of it's actually done by machine versus what part is done by hand, if any, these days?
Well, I have some idea, but for the idea of quality control, people seem to think that when every single card is printed and cut, that there is some human checking every single card before it goes in a booster pack, which isn't possible because they're printing, what, 9 billion cards a year. But every time people see a single, print a hickey or a crimp, they go, oh, quality control sucks. What quality control will do is they will check a very, very small sample of the print run. Often that'll be they'll wait until print run is complete to the point of stuff being sealed in boxes. I know for a lot of companies they'll do that. They'll just open the product as though a consumer would. So that's one thing, is they don't check every single card. And basically whatever they check, you're probably never going to see because it gets opened and doesn't then get repackaged. And also the other thing people need to remember is there will be an acceptable level of error for quality control. If quality control open, say, 6 booster boxes, like a case worth, and there's one card with a printer hickey or something on it, even if it's pretty visible, they're not going to bin off an entire production run because of one card out of a case. People talk about quality control because they think we see a lot more errors nowadays, but it's just because more cards are being printed. We can have the same percentage of cards having these errors, but when we're tripling, quadrupling the print rate, they're going to see triple, quadruple the amount of these cards out there.
Do you think error card collectors, and I know I'm generalizing and I really shouldn't do that, but for the purposes of the video, there's no other way for us to really do it. So do you think that in general, error card collectors collect because they really love the errors, or because that in their mind, they perceive that those are the more valuable pieces of Pokemon card collecting, lore, whatever that they can obtain?
I think it's to do with enjoying errors for a lot of people because the majority of errors don't add very much value at all. Stuff like crimps or print hickeys or a dodgy cut, like a card being slightly off-centered, like not talking about a card being so miscut it shows another card or anything, but slight off-centers. On the more valuable cards, it actually devalues the card a lot of the time. If we're talking about a common, a card that would be 1 or 2 cents normally, like, yeah, some error collector's probably going to pay you $1 or something for something with a significant crimp or a significant print hickey, but a lot of the time on more valuable cards it will devalue the cards. So I don't think people are going after them because they think that these errors are the most valuable things.
See, I don't see that when I look in the groups and I actually look at, oh, I'd love to buy that, private message you or direct message you and here's prices. I feel like they actually, to those folks, they actually increase the value. And that's kind of, why you see bidding going up in some occasional, bidding wars towards a card that, wouldn't even be of interest to me, but might be of interest to someone in that group. So I just look at that lens that they look through, and when I see, you know, people have such a heightened level of interest, and we have it. I mean, I had it for that Eveltal card that we were talking about the other day. There was a, is there like a, there's like a Dragonite card, Dan? Do you remember the one that
Yeah.
also was? Can you mention that one that didn't have like a attack number on it or something,
No, so
or
it
was it
was
a
there was a
stage error?
it was a stage error for the Dragonite. It was the non-hollow Dragonite that comes in a Roaring Skies theme deck. There was a very, very small number of them that said stage 1 instead of stage 2. That's a very rare error card. I think it was only like 12 theme decks or something that were known to have been, at least known to have been open and found that error card. But big, significant errors like that definitely do hugely increase the price. I'm talking about the very minor errors are the things that can often damage the price, and often you won't find too many people fighting over them.
Do you think that for error card collectors, Dan, that it could be a quantity thing? So it becomes like, well, I have more error cards than you. Like, because I noticed there's not always necessarily a theme behind it. And you mentioned a few of the different categories. But again, maybe, I guess from your perspective, it'd be nice. We should probably have an error card collector on here to just get their views. There's an idea for you, Dan. So, but do you think it becomes like I have more than you? And so therefore that sort of feeds on itself as well?
I don't think so. I don't think many error collectors that I've seen are motivated by just total number of errors that they have. There's a lot of people will do like species collecting errors, like they'll want any error associated with their favorite Pokemon, whether it's one of these super minor errors or something bigger. So I don't really see that many error collectors who are just like, I have this amount of errors total. Well, outside of species collecting, they might collect certain types of errors. Like there might be some collectors who will only collect crimped cards, or who will only go after these printer hickeys, or only go after off-center stuff. I don't. There's not that many collectors, I think, who will just go for any type of error.
What do you think, from your perspective, again, that the most desired type of error would be? You know, you mentioned miscuts, you mentioned hickeys, you mentioned like ink stuff extra on the card. Um, you know, we talked about well, so other ones. I'm slurring everything today. I should have had a nice heavy cup of coffee before we started, but I worry a little bit about the fact that some of these types of errors can be created unauthentically, right? So you start seeing enough crimped type cards and you're wondering, like, it'd be so easy to have a crimping type of situation and then just sporadically issue those cards on the market. You know, dot marks, ink off when they talk about acetone and all the baloney that's out there. So I think about miscuts as one of the ones that's pretty legitimate, you would think, unless again people are getting uncut sheets and doing something there. But do you have a feel for what the most desirable type of errors are?
I think the most desirable ones are the miscuts that go far enough to show another card. You'll have like maybe not half and half, but you'll have one card and maybe the name of the Pokemon's cut off, and you can see another Pokemon's name at the bottom, or it's far enough left or right that you can see the artwork of another card starting to show through. Which I think people can generally tell when those come not factory cut, which is the designation for if someone's cut the sheet themselves. People do tend to keep track quite a lot as well in these error card communities. I see this a lot more in Magic than I do in Pokemon. People keep track of what sheets are being cut specifically to create error cards like that. In Pokemon, I haven't seen very many people actually cutting sheets to make these error cards. It just seems like sheets are more desirable in Pokemon than these error cards, whereas in Magic, so many sheets get given out for different reasons on prize walls, or like any Grand Prix, any big events, you'll be able to get sheets as prizing in a lot of different ways. So there's a lot more Magic sheets out there. So there's a lot more incentive for people to cut the sheets in different ways because of the fact that the sheets themselves aren't that valuable. So at least in Magic, a lot of people will track what cards have come from a hand cut sheet and what sheets are known to have been cut. So I don't think we're that far away really from that happening in Pokemon. If sheets stop becoming more of a prevalent thing where there's more sheets out there to the point where the sheets are devalued, I think we'll start to see more people cutting them in weird ways. Not just cutting them to try and get mint cards, but cutting them to create errors and miscuts.
Have you seen some of the Pokemon sheets or error cards that came off of possibly sheets that were double printed? And I know I'm not saying that very well, but where you've almost got two different card images on the front of the card itself.
Yeah, I believe there was a theme deck full out there somewhere where it was like the back of the card I think is blank, but then the front has the front and back of the sheet printed on top of each other. And I know there's a couple of Pokemon cards out there, or sort of Pokemon cards out there at the moment, where it's got a Pokemon front and a Magic back printed together on the same side of the card. I know there's a couple of those going around. Those ones are pretty rare. And I mean the theme deck one is rare as well, but I think it was a full theme deck that had that error.
Dan, another thing that seems to be really popular in the air arena or in the arena. Dan, when I go to the air arena, it's a very special place. I can't talk about it because on your podcast everything is PG-13 and the arena is all just PG. So later on I'll tell you about that. But there's these things called hollow shifts, Dan, and they are remarkably popular. Like it is amazing. I've got those white back fossil hollow cosmos hollow cards. I'm the only owner of those in the world, which is fun. And they have a lot of those cards have what people tell me are hollow shifts. And invariably, when I'm talking to potential buyers, they're so excited by that. What are those, Dan? Like I can barely even see it, but it's some movement of the front of the sheet from the back, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so normally when you look at a Pokemon card, especially the older ones, when you look at those Cosmos foils, you'll see that the Cosmos is printed around the Pokemon. So it's like there would be a rectangle of Cosmos foiling where you can't see the Pokemon as being Cosmos foil. And then it's basically if you just took that silhouette and just shifted it up or down, so that, if you shifted it up, maybe the Pokemon's feet are now Cosmos foil, but you can see the outline of the Pokemon's head above it that isn't Cosmos foil. That's hollow shift. That's where the alignment of the machine is off and it's not allowing the Cosmos foil to show through in the correct places.
There's a set. It's from the Neo era, I believe. It's a card set numbered of 66 of 64 or something like that. Hopefully it'll ring a bell to you. And there's some well-known, very hard to come by hollow shift errors from that set. I have an extra set of those hollows in with my binder set. Do you know what Neo set that is, or am I
Yeah,
saying the
I
right one?
think it's Neo Revelation. I think you're thinking of the double hollow errors. Is that what you're
Yes.
thinking of?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe that was something in production that just caused there to be twice as much. It was either that the hollow was on there twice, or it's a weird one. I don't know the exact production details behind this because I don't know how this one happened exactly. But it's if you look at it, you can see that there's like the circles and the sparkles in the Cosmos foil. It's like there's double the amount of those, so it's almost entirely circles and stars and spots on the Cosmos holofoil rather than there being gaps between them a lot.
And sometimes I think that leads to another error type of word, which is saturation. Folks have mentioned that to me before. This concept of so when things like that do or don't happen, you can have an additional level of ink type saturation, which actually changes the color of the cards a little bit. Um, does that ring a bell too, Dan?
Are you thinking of hollow bleeds in that scenario, or are you thinking of?
Or the way that something is double printed or double hollowed up in that essentially because of additional lightness or darkness, the color appears a little different. So
Oh,
yeah.
that would be because that would be if one color was missing. We've seen some cards where, so people who don't know, when their cards are printed, they're printed with the four different ink colors of black, magenta, cyan, and yellow. And you can see cards where one of those four colors is missing. So, and I'm sure there's some commons from, I think, maybe Fusion Strike I know of out there where it's like it's the cyan color is clearly missing, because if you compare it side by side with a card, you can see like the reds and the yellows are much more clear because they're not mixed with the blue. So anything that would be green on the card is now just yellow, anything that would be purple is now just red.
When I was realizing, as I've gone back through the sets over the last several weeks and tried to comprehensively make sure I've double and triple checked all of my, completeness, I mentioned to you something about the Pikachu. I'm going to call it well, actually, it wasn't the ghost stamp, it was the gray stamp or something. And you mentioned to me, David, maybe you don't want to go down that road because gray stamps are just essentially, and this is from base set, I believe, but you'll tell our viewers in a second. You said maybe that's just, those are just like lack of ink errors, essentially. And they exist for a lot of those cards in that set. And so essentially, they're not really anything new, other than a lack of ink error and kind of placed all over the place. So talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so base set first edition is obviously base set was printed. The shadowless print run for base set was one print run, and then a portion of that print run had a first edition stamp placed on it. When you're seeing these gray stamps, it's, if there was low ink on the stamping machine or for some reason it didn't press as hard and not as much ink transferred to the card, you're seeing it a lot more faded rather than seeing it the nice solid black. And the reason I'm saying it's difficult to go down that rabbit hole is because it's not just a case of this is solid black or this is obviously gray. It's such a scale, all the way from fully solid black stamp to barely visible gray, just because the ink levels can change, the pressure levels could be off very, very slightly in different amounts. There's no solid change. It's fully a scale of where do you designate this is the start of the gray stamp,
I think of Bulbapedia as a reference place for me to review error cards in the sense of my own personal collecting. So it feels to me, and I obviously understand that Bulbapedia is not going to be entirely comprehensive at any one given point in time, but it's always working on it. It feels to me that when I use that, that's a great place for me to kind of start and for me ultimately almost finish the error card collecting journey of subset of part of my collection. So these are predominantly well known, no HP error cards or a line on the side cards or, a turned Diglett, whatever is on that card, a turned energy symbol. Is that a good place for people that maybe they want to make sure they've got the main ones, but they're not necessarily looking at getting every single type of, one-off too, that they use Bulbapedia for that? Is it complete enough, Dan? And is it have a way of putting things together that makes some kind of systematic sense as opposed to being arbitrary what's listed out there?
So Bulbapedia is pretty good at keeping up to date with errors that are errors at the design stage rather than at the printing stage. So when we're talking about things like the missing attack damage or having the wrong stage listed, that's an error at the design stage. That's when they're creating the sheets to be printed. They're making the digital files or however they make them. That's where those errors occur. And that's something that Bulbapedia is pretty good at keeping up to date on. They will track, some other errors, but they're not going to track, crimps and stuff because it happens to every card, or they're not going to track missing print layers. All of that stuff happens in the printing factory after Pokemon have sent the final designs over. So if you're interested in stuff like that, like the printing error stuff, the Facebook groups are the best place to go just to learn what's out there. And if you're interested in the design stage stuff, then Bulbapedia is a great start.
So that was my pearl of wisdom, my friend, and that's what I was waiting for, and I appreciate that. So design stage versus printing stage, and I love that. That's a great way for me to hopefully remember. Of course, I'll forget what you said as a way of characterizing what I do put in my collection and why. So that's what you gave me for today. I had one more question. How do they come up with correcting something and only so few get out? So you mentioned earlier in the video, you said something like that Dragonite with the stage error, 1 versus 2 or 2 versus whatever. only a handful got out, maybe theme decks. And then you had talked about the one for the Yveltal, and only, a couple of boxes or cases of that got out. How do you feel like, so that doesn't, none of that makes sense to me, because we think of, if a sheet got cut, well, it was 110 cards. It's not going to typically be less than that unless there's just a single sheet and there's only a few of those on the sheet. I guess it could be, because in the sheet there wouldn't be a whole bunch of those. There might only be 7 or 10 of them or whatever. But how do you think that gets corrected so early on in the process to where only a few get out? And how do those few get out?
So it would be with the Yveltals. The Yveltals are the face cards of those decks. Those would be on their own sheets. The Xerneas and Yveltals, it's probably a sheet full of half Xerneas, half Yveltal for those front ones. But it could be, if there's 60 of each card on the sheet, maybe only one of those 60 Yveltals is the error version. Maybe it was just the 80 didn't copy over properly when they were creating the template for one specific copy of the card on that sheet. I imagine it is just something where, after the design has been finalized, someone points it out and goes, "Oh, this was a mistake," and they go, "Oh, well, we're not going to stop production. We're just going to send over a new file to jump in at the next available point to keep printing. We're not going to scrap everything that's already been done." Or potentially a file issue on some design, on some errors, not really the ones we're talking about. Could be file issues that then get corrected pretty quickly, like actual digital transfer issues with digital files for creating the sheets. With both the Dragonite and the Yveltal, I'm talking about, there was these amount of cases found. I do believe that there would have been more made it out there for both the Yveltal and the Dragonite, but neither of those are collector-focused products. So my assumption is that any others that got out there, if they weren't noticed immediately, they would have just been opened, played with, maybe thrown out. They're not... Because the normal version of those cards, the Yveltal Blackstar promo and the Dragonite non-holo variant, aren't valuable cards. It's those things where, unless you know what you're looking for and unless you know what the card's supposed to look like, you're not going to notice that the card has an error on it. So there are likely more that got out there, but those two cards are ones where a case or two was noticed by a collector or by a store who was really savvy on what they were looking for, noticed immediately, and therefore all of the copies from those ones were taken out and kept nice. So those were all kept mint, immediately top loaded, that kind of thing. So that's why I think only a few of those are in circulation, because the majority of them will have gone to people who didn't know what they were looking at.
I'm going to finish today, Dan, by saying that one of my favorite movies, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of it. It's a TV show. You guys have all watched it. It's Christmas. It's like the Christmas show, and it's got the Abominable Snowman on it, and it's got I see, this is what happens after I don't sleep enough. But it's got, what's the guy's dentist? He wants to be a dentist. He doesn't want to be an elf. That whole movie was.
Are you talking about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
Yes, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That's the one. And so it's amazing, because people are actually watching me lose my complete and utter memory and mind on camera. This is going to be a great scientist study one day. So the guy, Freddie, gosh darn it, I know it like the back of my hand, and I don't know anything. So one of my favorite parts of the movie was the Island of the Misfit Toys. And I think back to how, you had the elephant or whatever with the red dots, and you had, the toys with the broken arms, and you had this guy that wanted to be the dentist. And it was all so cute and also innocent. And they were discarded until they were not discarded when they were brought in, all of the misfits. So that's what error cards are, a little bit of that misfit vibe. And there's still a lot of people that want to give them love. I wish a few of those people would want to give you more love, Dan. I know I want to give you more love. I know you need more love, Dan. I don't need any more love. I've got so much love. I'm overwhelmed by love, even though I've never actually had anybody tell me they love me. So you deal with that conundrum for 5 minutes and then spin your head around that. But thank you, Dan, for giving us just a cursory overview. I think it's important we get an error card collector on here, okay? I know some, they want exposure. They're much more popular than the two of us, so we'll find one to get on our podcast very soon. And they will tell us what makes them tick. And by the way, each and every error card collector I know of, they're all misfits too. So you couldn't talk about them because you don't see yourself in the mirror the way we all see you. So we're all a bunch of misfits just doing misfit things, and there's room in everybody's hearts for all of us, okay? So embrace us, don't disgrace us, all right? Take us in and don't discard us. Okay, I'm off my preacher soapbox now so Dan can finish up this darn video.
All right, well, you deal with that if you want to start bringing guests on again, and I'll figure out how I'm going to edit an episode with a guest overnight. Yeah, all right, I'm very tired. Like we've said, we've both been under the weather the last couple of days, so nothing else for me to say. Hopefully people enjoyed. I'm already hating the amount of images I know I'm going to have to make for this episode. So, yeah, let's end it there, and hopefully we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.